Najay Davenport. Najay Davenport had a solid NFL career as a running back, winning a Super Bowl with the Pittsburgh Steelers and carving out a role as a physical, downhill runner. But despite his on-field success, Davenport is far more infamous for one of the strangest scandals in football history. While still in college at the University of Miami, Davenport was arrested for an incident so bizarre, it still defies belief. According to police reports, he broke into a dorm room at Barry University and defecated in a woman's laundry hamper. She awoke to find him squatting in her closet. That's the story that would forever follow him. The incident became a running joke in sports media and late-night comedy for years. What's tragic is that Davenport had the talent to be remembered as a dependable backfield contributor. Instead, he became the punchline of one of the weirdest NFL stories ever, overshadowing everything he did on the field. Sam Hurd. Sam Hurd was supposed to be one of those under-the-radar success stories. An undrafted wide receiver out of Northern Illinois, Hurd worked his way up the Dallas Cowboys depth chart and became a reliable special teams player and occasional pass catcher. In 2011, he signed a $5 million contract with the Chicago Bears. But while his NFL career was taking off, his real ambitions were taking place off the field. And what was uncovered shocked the league. Shortly after signing with the Bears, Hurd was arrested outside a steakhouse in Chicago by undercover federal agents. The charge? Attempting to purchase and distribute massive quantities of cocaine and marijuana. Authorities claimed Hurd was trying to establish a full-fledged drug empire. According to court documents, Hurd told agents he wanted to buy 5 to 10 kilograms of cocaine and 1,000 pounds of marijuana per week to distribute across the Chicago area. He even claimed he had other NFL players as potential buyers. This wasn't a side hustle. This was a blueprint for a criminal operation on a massive scale. Once arrested, Hurd cooperated minimally, but never implicated any teammates. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to drug trafficking conspiracy. Josh Brent. Josh Brent was a massive defensive tackle drafted by the Dallas Cowboys in 2010. He wasn't a household name, but he carved out a spot on the Cowboys roster with raw strength and surprising quickness for his size. Off the field, he was known as a loyal friend and a laid-back teammate. But one night changed everything. On December 8, 2012, Brent and his teammate and close friend Jerry Brown were out partying in Dallas. Brown, a linebacker on the Cowboys practice squad, got into the passenger seat of Brent's Mercedes as they headed home. Brent, who had a prior DUI arrest, was drunk, well over twice the legal limit. Around 2:20 a.m., Brent lost control of the vehicle. It flipped and skidded to a halt on the highway. Brown was critically injured in the crash. Brent, somehow, was mostly unharmed. By the time emergency responders arrived, Brent had pulled Brown from the wreckage, but it was too late. Jerry Brown died at the hospital. What followed was both heartbreaking and uncomfortable. Brent was arrested and charged with intoxication manslaughter. He faced the possibility of 20 years behind bars, but the story didn't end with condemnation. At Brown's memorial service, his mother publicly forgave Brent and even embraced him. She later testified at trial, asking for leniency. Ultimately, Brent was sentenced to 180 days in jail and 10 years of probation, a punishment that divided public opinion. Some saw it as too light. Others pointed to Brown's family's wishes. Brent returned briefly to the Cowboys after serving his sentence, but retired shortly after. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed and dropped a like for the algorithm. Mark Shamura. In the 1990s, Mark Shamura was a fan favorite in Green Bay, a reliable tight end with great hands, and a strong connection to quarterback Brett Favre. He made 3 Pro Bowls, won Super Bowl 31, and seemed like the kind of player you'd want representing your franchise. But in 2000, that image crumbled. Shamura, who was married with children at the time, attended a post-prom party hosted by a high school student. That sentence alone was enough to raise eyebrows. But what followed sparked national outrage. A 17-year-old girl accused Shamura of sexually assaulting her in a bathroom at that party. He was charged with third-degree sexual assault, an offense that could have landed him in prison for up to 10 years. The trial gripped Wisconsin. Shamura had been a role model, appearing in family-friendly ads and community events. Now, he was on the front page for all the wrong reasons. His defense centered on consent and credibility. The courtroom heard about drinking, poor decisions, and blurred lines. Eventually, a jury acquitted Shamura of all charges. But even with a not guilty verdict, his career never recovered. The Packers released him, and most teams didn't want the media firestorm that would come with signing him. He later admitted the incident was morally wrong, even if not criminal, and said he brought embarrassment to his family and the Packers organization. Joe McNight. Joe McNight was once one of the most electrifying high school football players in America. So talented, he drew comparisons to Reggie Bush, and was dubbed the next big thing before he even chose a college. He went to USC, was drafted by the New York Jets, and showed flashes of greatness as a return man and dynamic runner. But his pro career never quite hit the heights fans expected. Injuries, inconsistency, and coaching changes derailed his momentum. Yet it wasn't his football stats that made headlines in the end. It was his death. In December 2016, McKnight was shot and killed in a road rage incident in Terrytown, Louisiana. He was just 28 years old. According to witnesses, McKnight and another driver, Ronald Gasser, got into a verbal altercation while driving. At a traffic light, McKnight exited his car. Gasser, still seated in his vehicle, pulled out a gun and shot him 3 times. Initially, Gasser wasn't arrested, sparking public outrage. Many pointed to racial dynamics. McKnight was a black man, Gasser was white, and criticized what looked like lenient treatment. The sheriff's office said Gasser had not tried to flee and had handed over his weapon. But the public saw something else, a man who shot and killed someone in broad daylight, walking free. Eventually, Gasser was charged with manslaughter. At trial, he claimed self-defense, saying McKnight had made threats and reached into his car. But the jury didn't buy it. In 2018, Gasser was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in prison. Demetrius Dubose. Demetrius Dubose was a team captain at Notre Dame, a second-round NFL draft pick by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and by all accounts, a charismatic, intelligent, and thoughtful man. But his story didn't end with football glory. It ended in one of the most controversial police-involved deaths in NFL history. After his NFL career stalled out in the late 90s, Dubose drifted between business ideas and world travel. He struggled to find footing post-football, but kept pushing forward, investing in ventures, staying fit, and trying to find peace after the game. But in July 1999, while staying in San Diego, that journey was cut short. Dubose had locked himself out of a house he was renting. When police arrived to investigate a reported break-in, what followed turned tragic. Officers claimed Dubose was acting irrationally and refused to comply. Eyewitnesses said he was confused, but not aggressive. He was shirtless, unarmed, and high on a combination of alcohol and recreational drugs, according to the toxicology report. In the chaos, San Diego police officers shot him 13 times. 5 of those bullets hit him in the back. The public reaction was explosive. Dubose's family, teammates, and civil rights activists demanded justice. How could an unarmed man be shot so many times when there were other options? How could a promising life that had once lit up college football fields end on a sidewalk in handcuffs and bullet wounds? No charges were filed against the officers. The district attorney's office ruled the shooting justified, citing Dubose's resistance and perceived threat. But to this day, many view it as one of the darkest intersections between race, mental health, and excessive force in professional sports history. Sier Wood. Sier Wood once had all the markings of a future star. He was a standout running back at Notre Dame, with speed, vision, and a nose for the end zone. Though he went undrafted in 2013, he bounced around NFL teams like the Texans, Patriots, Bills, and Raiders, always just a step away from securing a permanent spot. But his name would later reappear in headlines for something far darker than a roster move. In April 2019, Wood was arrested in Las Vegas. The charge? First-degree murder. Authorities allege that Wood and his girlfriend were responsible for the death of her 5-year-old daughter. The girl was found unresponsive in their apartment. The details that emerged were chilling. According to investigators, Wood had subjected the child to intense workouts as punishment. including wall sits and sit-ups, claiming it was discipline. He told police she needed to be toughened up. The autopsy revealed severe injuries, bruises on her stomach, back, legs, and arms. She had been repeatedly beaten. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the abdomen. Wood denied the abuse, but the evidence painted a horrifying picture of a man whose life had spiraled far from the field. The former running back, once known for cutting through defensive lines, was now facing the prospect of spending the rest of his life behind bars. Malik McDowell. Malik McDowell was supposed to be a game wrecker. Coming out of Michigan State, he was a dominant defensive force, 6 feet 6 inches, 300 pounds, with freak athleticism. That rare blend of size and skill convinced the Seattle Seahawks to take him early in the second round of the 2017 NFL Draft. But McDowell never played a single down for the Seahawks. And what happened next would spiral into one of the most bizarre off-field collapses in recent NFL memory. Just weeks after being drafted, McDowell got into a serious ATV accident. The injuries were career-altering. He suffered a concussion and facial injuries that sidelined him indefinitely. The Seahawks placed him on the reserve list, but questions grew about his recovery and commitment. Eventually, Seattle cut him in 2018 without him ever appearing in a game, but the ATV accident was just the start. Over the next few years, McDowell's name appeared in police reports more than game day programs. He was arrested multiple times, once for disorderly conduct and resisting arrest at a gas station, another time for concealing stolen property after being found with a stolen truck. But the most infamous moment came in 2022. In January of that year, security cameras captured a surreal scene. A naked McDowell wandering around the premises of a children's learning center in Florida. Police reports described him as aggressive and incoherent. When officers arrived, McDowell reportedly charged at them. He was tased, subdued, and arrested. The charges? Public exposure, assaulting an officer, and resisting arrest. Body cam footage went viral, and the headlines practically wrote themselves. What made it all more tragic was that McDowell had seemingly redeemed himself, briefly. He had made a comeback with the Cleveland Browns in 2021 and played in 14 games, recording 3 sacks. But that moment of stability didn't last. Darren Sharper. Darren Sharper was supposed to be the golden boy, a 5-time Pro Bowl safety, Super Bowl champion with the New Orleans Saints, an NFL Network analyst after retirement. He had it all. Sharper was charismatic, media-friendly, and respected across the league, which is exactly what made his downfall so terrifying. Behind the charming smile and Hall of Fame caliber career was a secret double life. Between 2013 and 2014, disturbing allegations began to surface. Women across multiple states, California, Nevada, Arizona, and Louisiana, accused Sharper of drugging and assaulting them. What began as whispers became a full-blown national scandal. The details were horrifying. Investigators found a disturbing pattern. Sharper would allegedly meet women at clubs or parties, offer them drinks laced with sedatives like Zolpidem or morphine, and then wait for them to lose consciousness. These weren't isolated incidents. They were systematic. Eventually, the floodgates opened. Sharper was charged in federal and state courts, with authorities uncovering cases spanning 9 women in 4 states. The legal proceedings exposed the depth of his predatory behavior. Prosecutors even described him as a serial predator, one who used his fame to gain trust and then exploit it in the most disturbing way. Sharper pled guilty to multiple charges, including rape and conspiracy to distribute controlled substances. In 2016, he was sentenced to 18 years in prison, a shocking fall for someone once seen as a role model. The NFL, silent. The league distanced itself quickly. His name has been scrubbed from highlight reels, his face disappeared from broadcasts, and his Hall of Fame eligibility basically erased from public conversation. Stanley Wilson Sr. The night before the Super Bowl is supposed to be sacred. It's the calm before the storm. The final moment of focus before the biggest game of your life. But for Stanley Wilson Sr., it became the moment that ended everything. Wilson was a running back for the Cincinnati Bengals, talented, explosive, and unfortunately battling a severe drug addiction. On January 21st, 1989, the Bengals were in Miami preparing to face the San Francisco 49ers in Super Bowl 23. That night, Wilson disappeared from the team meeting. Coaches found him hours later, naked, shivering, and completely out of it in a hotel bathroom. He had gone on a cocaine binge the night before the Super Bowl. It wasn't his first offense, it was his third. And under the NFL's three-strike drug policy, it was his last. The Bengals were blindsided. Head coach Sam Wyche later said the locker room felt like a funeral. Wilson had been part of their game plan. His sudden absence and the disturbing circumstances surrounding it shook the team before kickoff. They lost the game in heartbreaking fashion, 20-16. And many within the organization believe the emotional toll of Wilson's relapse played a role in that loss. But Wilson's story didn't end there. After being banned for life by the NFL, his downward spiral continued. He was arrested multiple times throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, mostly for burglary and drug-related offenses. He eventually ended up serving time in prison, including a 22-year sentence handed down in 2008. Perhaps the saddest part is what could have been. Wilson was once a star at the University of Oklahoma and a third-round NFL draft pick. But his legacy isn't a career stat line. It's the tale of an addiction that robbed him of greatness and left his team stunned on football's biggest stage. Charles Grant. In the NFL, defensive ends are known for controlled chaos, fighting through 300-pound linemen, chasing down quarterbacks, and setting a tone of aggression. But in 2008, Charles Grant's aggression spilled into something darker. Grant was a key figure on the New Orleans Saints defensive front, a former first-round pick out of Georgia who had helped solidify the team's defense in the mid-2000s. He was respected for his power and intensity on the field, but off the field, one night in Georgia changed everything. That night, a fight broke out outside a nightclub in Blakely, Georgia, Grant's hometown. Details are still murky, but what's known is that a woman named Corinda Reed, a 23-year-old mother of two, was struck by a stray bullet and tragically lost her life. Grant wasn't accused of firing the shot, but he was indicted on involuntary manslaughter charges for allegedly inciting or participating in the fight that led to the shooting. For a man known mostly for tackles and sacks, the legal battle was jarring. The NFL didn't suspend him immediately, but the shadow of the case loomed large. He eventually reached a plea deal in 2010, pleading no contest to a lesser charge of public affray, a misdemeanor. He avoided jail time, but paid a fine and settled a civil suit with the victim's family. Grant's career never fully recovered. Injuries and declining performance saw him bounce from team to team in the final years of his NFL run, but his name never really returned to the spotlight, not in a good way. Kellen Winslow II. He had the bloodline, the pedigree, the raw talent. Kellen Winslow II was supposed to be the next great NFL tight end, a torchbearer for his Hall of Fame father and a symbol of football royalty. But what started as a promising career unraveled into one of the darkest and most disturbing scandals in recent NFL memory. Drafted 6th overall in 2004 by the Cleveland Browns, Winslow was built like a wide receiver, but hit like a linebacker. His intensity was undeniable, sometimes too much so. He once infamously shouted in a college interview, "I'm a expletive soldier," after a brutal game. That energy translated into flashes of brilliance in the league, but also a slew of injuries, most notably a devastating motorcycle accident in 2005 that nearly ended his career. But it wasn't his physical injuries that defined the back half of his life. It was his criminal behavior. In 2018, Winslow was arrested in California on charges of sexual assault. The accusations weren't minor. He was accused of targeting elderly women, sometimes homeless, and assaulting them in parking lots, mobile home communities, and even his own vehicle. Over time, multiple women came forward with harrowing stories, and in 2019, a jury found him guilty of rape and other sex crimes, including indecent exposure and lewd conduct. In 2021, he was sentenced to 14 years in prison. His attorney, and even Winslow himself, blamed CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, the brain disease linked to repeated head trauma. And there's likely some truth to that. Doctors did report signs of frontal lobe damage, but for the victims, the diagnosis didn't erase the trauma. Kellen Winslow II went from being a Pro Bowl athlete to a registered sex offender locked away behind bars. Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy was once one of the most dominant pass rushers in the NFL, A Pro Bowl defensive end with 15 sacks in a season, he had the physical tools and swagger to become a face of the Carolina Panthers defense. But in 2014, his entire career and reputation imploded. Hardy was arrested and charged with assaulting his ex-girlfriend. The details were graphic and disturbing. She accused him of throwing her onto a bed covered in firearms and physically threatening her life. Though a judge initially found him guilty, the charges were later dropped when the accuser stopped cooperating. Hardy always denied the allegations, but the damage was done. The Panthers let him walk. The Dallas Cowboys took a controversial chance on him, hoping his talent would outweigh the baggage. It didn't. His on-field production declined, but it was his demeanor that sealed his fate. Hardy showed no remorse, got into sideline altercations, and made bizarre public comments that only intensified public backlash. When his NFL career sputtered out, Hardy tried to rebrand himself in MMA, an equally violent sport that only added to his polarizing legacy. But even in the UFC, his record was spotty, and controversy followed him. Alonzo Spelman. In the 90s, Alonzo Spelman was a beast on the field, an elite defensive end with unmatched explosiveness. Drafted 22nd overall by the Chicago Bears in 1992, he quickly became known for his terrifying presence on the line. But as his football career climbed, his mental health quietly unraveled behind the scenes, culminating in one of the most chaotic and unsettling breakdowns the league has ever seen. In 1998, teammates noticed something was off. Spelman began acting erratically, lashing out in meetings, and displaying increasingly paranoid behavior. It all came to a head when he had a full-blown psychotic episode on the front lawn of a teammate. Police were called as Spelman refused to leave, ranting incoherently, sweating profusely, and reportedly threatening to kill himself if doctors tried to sedate him. It took the intervention of teammate Mike Singletary, a devout Christian and father figure on the Bears, to calm him down enough to accept help. But that wasn't the end of it. In 2002, years after bouncing around the NFL with stints on the Cowboys and Lions, Spelman had another outburst, this time midair. While on a Delta flight, Spelman stripped shirtless, began screaming about bombs, and threatened passengers. The plane made an emergency landing, and Spelman was arrested. It later came out that he had bipolar disorder, a condition he had refused to consistently treat. He eventually served 18 months in federal prison for the incident. Spelman later spoke out about his condition, admitting that for years he denied the diagnosis and refused medication, believing he didn't need help. His story became a tragic warning about what happens when mental illness goes untreated, especially in a high-contact sport like football, where head trauma only makes things worse. He's since worked to rebuild his life, speaking publicly about his battle with bipolar disorder and even becoming an advocate for mental health awareness in the NFL. Tamar Vanover. He was electric with the ball in his hands. Tamar Vanover was a human highlight reel, drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs in 1995 after a stellar college career at Florida State. Vanover made an immediate impact as a kick returner. In his rookie season, he became the first player in NFL history to win a game in overtime on a punt return touchdown. That kind of explosiveness made him a fan favorite. But while he was dazzling on Sundays, a darker life was unfolding off the field. In 2000, everything unraveled. Vanover was arrested and charged in connection with a massive stolen car ring based in Florida. The details were wild. The ring was smuggling stolen luxury cars to the Caribbean, using fake documents, middlemen, and shell companies to launder money. Vanover helped finance it. He funneled his NFL earnings into the operation and even helped coordinate logistics. And that wasn't all. Vanover later admitted to accepting improper benefits while at Florida State, part of a larger NCAA investigation that also implicated other FSU players. But while many violations were brushed off as minor infractions, Vanover's criminal case couldn't be ignored. He eventually pled guilty to conspiracy to transport stolen vehicles, served 2 months in federal prison, and was suspended by the league. By the time he returned to the field, the shine was gone. The Chiefs cut ties. The NFL had moved on. He made a brief attempt at a comeback in the CFL, but it didn't stick. For someone who once lit up Arrowhead Stadium with game-breaking returns, Vanover became a forgotten name, buried under court transcripts and federal charges. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed. Thanks for watching.